services agreement on engineering consulting on the water treatment plant. Contract with Knife River for street maintenance, and contract for architecture for the final design on the Public Works facility project. Those are all up for non-discussion on consent tonight. Any questions of council at this point on any of those? I don't see any. No items of concern. They survived the fireworks on the 4th without problems in your neighborhood? It was loud.
It was the loudest I've ever heard since I have been here.
Yeah, I think people were letting out frustrations. All right, seeing none of those, why don't we then move into our work session items, as long as there's no concerns, starting with the police policy, potential reforms, and local alternatives staff reports.
All right, Mayor, so the way we've kind of queued this up is to have Greg Leo cover the recent activity at the Oregon State Legislature in this short session, followed by Chief Werps. He'll have some things to say, and then Zoe Monahan will cover some of the local things that we've been looking at and some initiatives that we could bring to bear in the community. And then Bill Evans will conclude with some of the outreach that we're doing on Let's Talk Wilsonville and some other ideas that council can explore for outreach.
Okay, that sounds good. I should note for the record that the council is here with the exception of Councilor West at the moment on tonight's work session. Please go ahead.
Greg, it's all yours.
Mr. Lee.
Okay, thank you. I have some slides. I want to go through what the legislature accomplished during this. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay, very good. This was quite a important and brisk legislative session. In 3 days, they dealt extensively with the police accountability issue. My slides are going to quickly hit the high points. You have the materials in the packet. But the first, of course, was Senate Bill 1604, which really changed the discipline guidelines and arbitration decision process. Now, this bill had been pending with two previous legislatures and basically died in the process during the last long session. So it establishes a discipline matrix and a guide for the mandatory dealing with problems with police accountability. So it basically will standardize it so that it isn't affected by the collective bargaining decision. So arbitrators would be guided by this matrix. So this Senate bill passed, you can see, by a very wide margin. In fact, it was unanimous. House Bill 4207 created transparency in the police disciplinary record. So basically, this creates a statewide database of the records of police officers, which can be reviewed by future employers. It's also publicly accessible, so that if the public has questions about an individual officer's personnel record, they can actually go online and take a look at those records. Importantly, from the city's point of view, it provides for immunity from civil action for the city when these records are released. So this creates quite a bit of new transparency. House Bill 4201 was originally the bill that would give authority to the Oregon Attorney General, but was changed after testimony came in from the Attorney General. It created this new joint committee on transparent policing and the use of force. And so this committee is going to be working. They see this as kind of the beginning of a process. And the president and the speaker have just, about 3 days ago, released the next steps under House Bill 4201. So so this is what the Joint Committee is charged to do, and presumptively it will be happening in a task force during the interim, and will be coming back at the next long session, which convenes next February. But they're going to examine the policies to improve transparency in investigations and in complaints regarding use of force of officers, examine policies that reduce the prevalence of serious injury or death, the use of force by officers, analyzing the use of force. So use of force has been a key element in all of these policy deliberations. They're going to determine the most appropriate policies for independent review, which I think meets some of the concerns that people have had about what happens post incident, and then create procedures for the analysis of looking at the various incidents. They're going to examine other policies that increase transparency in policing. So it's really a very wide legislative mandate for this 12-member committee. Wilsonville Senator Kim Thatcher will be a member of this committee. So largely these are members that have come from the judiciary committees in both the House and the Senate. House Bill 4205 creates a duty to report and intervene. So it requires that all police and reserve officers must intervene in cases of excessive force or other serious misconduct, and that includes sexual misconduct, and report those incidents of misconduct to a supervisor. And that passed, of course, unanimously. House Bill 4208 protects freedom of speech and assembly from excessive force, and it in theory it bans tear gas, but unless a riot has been declared. And so, as you've seen in Portland, since this bill was considered, that police will declare a riot before they use tear gas. There are also provisions that say that they must announce that they're going to use tear gas, so that individuals can leave the area knowing that tear gas would be used. Also, it has similar controls over sound cannons. Sound cannons are a tactic used by the police to control riot and other kinds of civil disturbances. For our local police departments, the aerosol sprayers, such as the containers that an officer might carry, which they use in close proximity, are not affected by this bill. Again, this bill passed pretty much unanimously. House Bill 4203 outlaws the use of respiratory restricting. So this really goes to the crux of the Floyd incident, where it is just illegal under this to use a chokehold or other physical tactic which will impede air and blood flow unless other deadly force criteria are met. So in other words, this practice is outright banned unless there is a situation where the officer would otherwise have the ability to use deadly force. And of course, I think that generally is where an officer's life or the life of an innocent would be at risk. So this kind of goes to the heart of the tragic incident in Minnesota. This passed the House with 5 dissenting votes in the House and 1 in the Senate. So of these 6 bills, one of them passed without amendment, and that was the Senate bill, because it had been pretty well considered in advance. The other 5 all were passed with whereas clauses, where the legislature chose to say, whereas Black Lives Matter. So Senator Courtney Neron, I think, has made a pretty good statement here that explains the legislature's intent. It says the 6 police academy bills that we passed don't solve the problems of excessive force or systematic racism overnight, but they are steps in the right direction to a more fair system. And legislators are reminded for the need and motivation of these policies by the whereas Black Lives Matter statements. So these are important policy statements, and it is unusual to kind of codify a whereas statement in statute, but this was important important. And the legislature wanted to make a very strong point that this was an important policy and needed to be put into law. And so she goes on to say that she is committed to engage in this ongoing work, and just the amazing work of the people of Color Caucus, who really were the people who brought forward this important package of legislation. So I think Courtney does a really good job of describing the whereas Black Lives Matter clauses. Thank you. I hope I haven't taken too long. I did want to give you a quick overview. My report has more complete details about these bills. Happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to work with the city of Wilsonville.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. Mr. Cosgrove, shall we go ahead and hear the rest of testimony before we go back for discussion?
I think you're fine. If you have, after every segment, if you have questions of whoever's speaking, I think it's fine to take a pause.
Council, questions regarding the information we've just heard? Councilor Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Leo, for the all of the detail that we received in the packet. I looked at the language and could not find the whereas statement. Is that someplace that we could easily see it?
Absolutely. It's in the, it's actually in the bills. So, and as passed now, it's state law. So I did not give you the bills. I probably should have.
Well, I looked in the bill. I looked in all of the bills and did not see a whereas statement in all of them.
Yeah, I'd be happy to pull those out and forward those in. Did you want to look at those tonight?
Well, I would like to see what that statement says.
Yeah.
Because I think we're going to discuss a lot of other issues that are related to that, particularly. And I noted in your detailed report that you noted where there was some proclamation about, the emphasis on the Black Lives Matter movement. And that is what I want to know what that language actually says.
I'll be happy to pull that, Councilor Linville, and send that to you. I do want to point out, though, that of these 5 statements, they're different. So the language, the Black Lives Matter language varies between the different bills and has different emphasis that really kind of tailors that statement to the bill. But I am happy to pull from the legislation the 5 sections of the bills which have the language, because it is extremely well-crafted language, and happy to share that.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Other questions for Mr. Leo? Councilor Ackervall.
Yeah, I wondered, thank you very much for your presentation and for the information that was included in our packet. I wondered if you could share a little, as you said, the House Bill 4201 is, I think you said, the beginning of a process, right? There will be more to come on that. And so I'm curious what the follow-up on that might be. Information for us, information also for the public, so we can all learn more about that. And then as far as timing on some of these, on the House Bill 4203 and 4205, I wondered if you could share some more on timing for those.
Okay, I'll start with the last part of the question first. Thank you, President Ackervall, for the question. The timing is that these were passed with emergency clauses and have been signed, and therefore are going into effect as state law almost immediately. The Speaker and the President, and I have the Speaker's statement here in front of me, have put together the joint committee, and they're going to be starting to meet as a task force almost immediately. So the public can participate in all of these, because these our committee meetings, much like a Ways and Means Committee or a Transportation Committee, all of this information will be on the Oregon Legislative Information System, or OLIS, and the legislature has managed a process now where individual citizens can give testimony and put, materials and written testimony and other things into the record via OLIS. So I am very happy to provide that information put up for the city to put that up to encourage citizens to be able to participate in this process. But I have to say this is a very robust response by the legislature to this issue. And there's a strong sense that this is the beginning of a process where they really do intend to engage all of Oregon in the discussion about how we, correct these historic problems. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Thanks for the opportunity to follow this, and I will keep an eye on all this and make sure that I monitor every hearing and report back through Brian Cosgrove. And
I appreciate it. I'm hoping you might be able to stay with us tonight till we get through the rest of the presentation, because there may be discussion that would lead back to you at that point, if you're able.
Happy to, Mayor. Thank you very much. I'll stand by for any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up then.
Chief Works.
That's me. Hello, everyone. So primarily what I want to start with is I've been approached by several members of the public and some members of the council about this campaign called 8 Can't Wait. It's a campaign that was done by activists, reform activists, and it got some traction. I'm happy to see it's well known and well regarded. So I'm going to cover those 8 points, some of which was actually covered by these House bills, and I'll talk about those relations. So, and I'm happy to say, like even before all the House bills and before some of this got to the legislation, in spirit we were there. When I looked at policy, we really had looked at there were nuances we didn't quite meet, but overall I feel pretty good about where we're at to start with. So number one was that they asked that we ban all chokeholds and strangleholds. Obviously that was addressed by House Bill 4203, and our policy will be amended to meet that period. But prior to even that, it wasn't specifically addressed, but that wasn't something we trained at the police academy or at our training monthly. Number two talks about requiring de-escalation. So in our policy, the word de-escalation wasn't specifically referenced, but there was language in there about using language to try to calm a scene before force is used. I will say that de-escalation is really part of our culture and daily practice. Frankly, it's a badge of honor. I mean, if a guy can come into a hot scenario and really talk people down, right, and get control of this and come to a peaceful resolution, that's what we want, and we're proud to do a good job at that. But we're open to amending our policy to specifically include that language. And it is trained, the de-escalation part is also part of training at DPST, and we're one of the few agencies that does monthly training both on use of force and de-escalation. It's all part of parcel, but there's room to improve, and we will do that. The third point, require warning before shooting, and our policy meets that, and it has, ever since I've been a police officer, it said you must issue warnings whenever practical or possible before using deadly or lethal force. So we meet that one straight away. 4, exhaust all alternatives before shooting. Again, that one's, it's not in policy. Our policy basically follows all the standards set by the Supreme Court and subsequent case law, both state and federal. The problem with requiring it, I mean, we want to require it, and it should be done in all cases, and it will be looked at, did this happen prior to a lethal force incident? However, there are, as you can all imagine, instances where that's just not practical. But overall, it is a practice, and again, we're okay with amending it or clearing up the language in our policy specifically to that. Duty to intervene, again, this was covered by legislation in House Bill 4205. Our policy prior to that, and we'll amend it to specifically match, of course. Our policy prior to that did require that any excessive force, policy violations, law violations, sexual harassment, anything of that nature, there was a mandate to report those things to a supervisor and that a subsequent investigation was done. So we did meet that, but the part that wasn't in there that we will amend was to physically intervene if necessary, right? Again, we'll improve and get better and fix that. At number 6, ban shooting at moving vehicles. This one's been banned for a long time in our policy, so we meet that policy or have met that I shouldn't say policy, we've met that recommendation. Number 7 then is require a use of force continuum. This one, a lot of research, like the folks that put this together, I understand how they got here and why they want this. But ultimately it's found not to be best practice through police research, the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF. They do a lot of our data research and analytics and so forth. And the problem with that is, and I'll try to explain why we don't use a continuum per se, because it was required steps. Like, okay, I'm physically present, I have used loud verbal commands, and then the next step is this, and then this, and then this. But what we found was it caused a lot of problems when we got into these really dynamic situations that the officers were hesitating, like, gosh, have I done this, this, and this before I can do this? So what our policy does do, again, here is again, this policy was written for us to fit within state and federal laws as they currently are. We also stay up with all the current case rulings and best practices about how to go about this in terms of training. So for us, the policy is reasonable. What's the most reasonable use of force based on the scenario presented to us? So, but you'll find if you've looked at some of the other police departments' response to the 8-count weight, I think you'll see a similar type response specifically related to the continuum. And then number 8, require comprehensive reporting. That's been very important to us for a long time, so we've met that recommendation and have for a long time. For us, use of force, even threatened use of force or a displayed use of force are all required to be reported, regardless of whether it was used or not. Even if we said we were going to, sir, please stop that, or I will tase you, or I will do this, those are required to be reported as well. And those reports are required to be done prior to the end of the officer shift, and then reviewed by a supervisor, a second supervisor, and then myself or lieutenant watch commander. And then also it goes to our training division, which looks at each of these scenarios and then starts to look for, hey, are we seeing an increased trend in this particular scenario, and are the responses that the officers are using working, or are they not working? And then they look at those, and then they begin to adjust their training to modify. And again, this happens monthly. So then they begin to develop scenarios or make modifications to training specifically to what they're seeing happen out there. So that's how we currently match up to the 8-count weight, and obviously with the House bills, we'll make some modifications so that we're compliant with those. No doubt about that. We're always looking to improve, so I was happy to be close to these to begin with. Yes, ma'am.
Councilor Lind.
I didn't know if it was appropriate to ask questions about this section or wait until, Chief, you were finished.
Fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I had a question about number 3. And I guess the number 4, because I sat in on the curriculum videos that were done, or webinars that were done for the Police Academy, and there was discussion about the Graham versus Connor and the Tennessee versus Garner cases, and the use of deadly force to protect themselves or others from what they reasonably believe would be an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. But on number 3, when we go up to the use of, I think it's the second bullet there, and it talks about the use of deadly physical force to prevent an escape or make an arrest. Are those two in conflict, or, is that saying that in the, that there is the ability for our CCSO personnel to use deadly physical force in response to resistance.
Right, so again, all that has to be in context of what's reasonable, right? So we're not going to use deadly force for an ordinance violation, right? And even with resistance or escape, these things they all have to be weighed into that reasonableness factor. So it's not just a carte blanche, oh, that person's trying to escape, so we're authorized to use deadly force. It doesn't work that way. You have to weigh in the seriousness of the crime as one of the components. So typically when we talk about I think if part of the question's the escape piece. In that one, in the one case, when you're weighing that out, right? So if you have a suspect, and I don't like to be graphic, but I think it's important here. If you have a suspect who's, say, we had this not too long ago, they're in the process of killing multiple people, we don't have any indication that their intention is to stop and they're fleeing us, right? Those are the scenarios when the escape part comes into play, but otherwise that's not just a carte blanche thing. Does that answer your question, or was there?
Yeah, I think it's probably, getting to where your direction is as our chief, as well as being, an official of the CCSO, and that is, what are we telling our officers in terms of, you try and restrain somebody and they get up and they can start running away. How, is that reason to use deadly force because they're now, running away from you? So.
Yeah, the seriousness of the crime is part of the analysis here. And frankly, guys get away from us. It's not uncommon, right? We've tangled with people, they run faster or got away in the nighttime. These things happen, and it's part of doing business for us. That doesn't give us any right to use lethal force. Again, the scenario would have to be very, very egregious for us to make any sort of serious force use on the escape part of things.
So if I could kind of piggyback on that, Chief, the events nationally that happened and were reported recently about the fellow that was in a parking lot at a fast food restaurant, and he tangled with the officers, and he ended up grabbing a taser and running away, and he turned and apparently ineffectively shot the taser wildly in some direction, and they shot it, and so you say the words we have indicate the reasonableness standard, and yet under the intensity of emotions that are occurring, how do we prevent something like that from being something that's likely to happen?
Right there, that is the question, I think, that all of us are trying to address. And I think that when we talk about what the legislation's looking at as far as best practices, techniques, what's leading to these things, I think that's where I think we'll get closer answers. I'm not going to be able to provide you an answer on that. I'm as familiar with that case as you are in terms of what I saw in the news and what the media reported, but I don't have the intimate knowledge of all the rest of the details that come with something like that, So I can't Monday morning quarterback that particular case, but what I do look forward to is what research are we going to do, and what are we going to find are the best practices and techniques to deal with scenarios like that, so we don't, until they end up better, because that's what we want to do. We want to do this in a way that meets the public expectation, but is safe for everyone as well.
Yeah, I think that we need to have the right policy, but then we also need to be cognizant that in the intensity of situations, that it's not always easy to get policy to be followed. And how do we build a culture that kind of sort of sets an underlying level of expectation that aligns with the policy in some way?
I agree. I've studied, the importance how culture is really more important to look at than policy, because culture is actually what's happening on the front line, right? So that's you're on the money there. That's a very important piece. And I think that part of the answer there, and DPST has made some advances in that regard, is the scenario-based training. It's one thing to explain procedure or policy or use a PowerPoint on this stuff, but it's a whole other thing when we develop a scenario that has moving parts and stimulates emotion, and so that we can work through that too. So to me, I guess the shorter answer is that we improve not only the training and the training of the policy, but also training in terms of dealing with these things and our emotional response to them.
Yeah. Council President Ackervall.
I think I kind of have a question that piggybacks on that a little, and I don't know if you want to present more and then we loop around, because this topic of training, I guess, in some ways it's touched on by the 8 Can't Wait, and then there's parts of it I think that are separate from the 8 Can't Wait too. Specifically around training on implicit bias and cultural competency and understanding. And I also attended the DPSST webinars, which was really good for me because it helped expand my own learnings and understanding of the topic. And one thing that I heard and learned there is the training that's required as part of the DPSST training that everybody across the state goes through. And then there's additional training that happens once you're in the community that you're going to be working in that's maybe more specific to the work that you would be doing in that community. And so they didn't cover any of that training, that is happening at Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. And so I want to understand that piece of it more too. And what sorts of training do we have on bias that's happening and how regular, and not just the de-escalation, but there's so many different facets to this. So I want to understand that part better, as well as what types of training and what frequency do we have for the people specifically working in Wilsonville. When they're working with community members that might be in the midst of mental health crisis as well, things like that. So I kind of hope that we can touch on that sometime during our conversation this evening or in future follow-up conversations as well, because I think this is an ongoing conversation. So thank you very much for joining us this evening and in the future as well. And then also I had some question on one of the pieces that does kind of go to the 8 Can't Wait, and that's on the reporting process. I want to understand what the reporting process specifically for Clackamas County or people in our community, what does that look like? Who sees the report? What can people expect? And, because you and I think we've exchanged communications on the police report that you give in our council packets regularly, and I really appreciate, having those statistics. And sometimes I ask, what's going on if I see an uptick in one area or a down or something, so I'm looking at those and I'm interested in those. And I wonder how some of this additional information that I'm becoming aware of and wanting to have, is that something that could be folded into some of those regular reports that we're getting? Or I'm curious what your ideas are for continuing kind of the conversation and the examination of this as we go forward too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the annual report is really just crafted on, it's data heavy, as you know, right? It's really just kind of a glimpse of numbers to show the public what we're doing, right, numbers wise. But if it's important, and it is, obviously, as from what I hear, that there's other things in there. And so that annual report's completely developable. We can develop it to what we want to see, right? So if those are the type of things that folks are interested in, let's put them in there. That's easy to do, which brings me to my next thing I wanted to, it matches perfectly here. And and that's our stop data, right? So we actually have to report to the state all our stops, and I've talked about this before, and that includes pedestrian stops, traffic stops, and we're collecting that. And I did share with you, and I will share with the group what that looks like. And I know you've asked for more specific breakdown. So what we have right now is the data breakdown for the county overall, and it shows all our stop data from that, and we've cleaned it up some. The state breaks it down a different way, and at the sheriff's office, we kind of made it a little bit easier to understand. And what we see is what we'd expect, right? We don't see any anomalies that are of great concern to us. It matches the ratios of what it should. We believe we're pretty happy with what it shows. I know you've talked about wanting to do that more specific for the city, and we'll work on that. It will take a little bit of time. And I also want to, as I was looking at that, I learned through the courts that only 28% of the people cited were residents of Wilsonville. So sometimes I think that county number is actually maybe a little bit more reflective of what's actually happening out there, but we can certainly look at what's happening city specific as well. And those could easily be built into the annual report.
Okay. Could you give us a little bit more information on some of the reporting process and how that works in your office specifically?
Yeah, well, so we write reports on everything, you name it, and we're on that. But so is there something specific you're asking about, whether it's, because we take crime reports, right? Those are the reports we take from the public.
But we're getting, I guess, the comprehensive reporting. So that you were talking, the final number 8, bullet point 8 in the 8 can't wait, that comprehensive reporting as far as, what does that look like, and what is that process?
So we have a specific report called the use of force report, and it goes through a very detailed questionnaire about the entire scenario, what type of force was used, what were the circumstances leading up to that. And we teach our guys to be very specific about what did the person say, what was the person's body posture, was it dark outside, any detail you could think of that might be important to included in those. And then when the officer is done with that at the end of the shift, then let me back up. So when a use of force occurs, the deputy notifies the supervisor immediately. And then the supervisor actually comes to the scene and does an investigation there on top of interviewing any witness that may have been in the area. We're going to want to review cell phone video, like anything we can possibly use to help us understand what happened there is going to be looked at. And then that's all recorded, and then if there's video, it's logged into evidence, and all the documentation's done. And then from that sergeant reporting just the use of force report, there's another one that reviews the overall report. And the overall report means that the crime report and everything else that went along with the use of force. The use of force is its own little standalone piece, but usually part of a bigger report, i.e. whatever crime we were called to, or whatever criminal things were happening or not. And then those are all tied together. And so another supervisor looks at the overall package. And then beyond that, I'll review it for my guys. Lieutenants will review it for the different shifts at the sheriff's office at a greater scale. And then, like I said, then the training department looks at it from the stance of, okay, what is it we're seeing trend-wise, or what are we teaching that's working or not working? So that's kind of the layers of it and how that works in a little bit greater detail.
So then are we looking at it in the aggregate as well and kind of doing analysis of the aggregate as far as how often is this happening within Wilsonville, and what are the different circumstances that, is it possible to sometimes when you look at the collection of data instead of the individual pieces, you get a different understanding of what's going on.
Absolutely. I know we do use of force reporting in a bigger picture, and I know that's one of the things I'll have to follow up with you on, because I know the mayor also sent me a question from a citizen that was related to that as well. She wanted to know specifically where we are on certain points of the review we did, and some of that had to do with the reporting and release of it in the annual report for the sheriff's office. So that's something I'm going to have to follow up on and get information to you guys as to what we're going to move toward in the future, because that's what we're going to change what that looks like and get it out there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Linville?
I just wanted to follow up with some of the questions that Councilor Akkerval was asking you, and I guess I have the confidence that you're looking at those, that our officers are reporting all of those things. I'm just concerned that if we wait until an annual report, that some of the things that at least I think we as the city should be looking at, whether it is through the city manager, through the mayor's office, or the council as a whole, that that we're, it's kind of it's too late. It's too late to wait till the end of the year. So I'm just wondering if there isn't, and I'm not asking for the answer right now, but the possibility of, as we have these discussions along the way, to figure out how do we get a reasonable picture about that without having to get all the way through all the detail of all of those reports, but kind of pick out what are those elements that are the most important to look at, and so that we're doing our due diligence in terms of keeping on top of it. So.
Understood. And so those numbers they're live. So I can pull those at any time, aggregate. So we don't have to wait to the end of the year for any of these. This isn't something that happens only at the end of the year. The way our systems work and our data entry works is I could probably pull it right now to see what it looks like for whatever time frame we would like to look at. So all those things are possible, and we're certainly open to see what we can do to get that out more frequently if that's what we want to do.
Councilor Lehan.
Yes, I just wanted to address a little bit, because I figure it must be where it's supposed to go, but in number 2 on these, it can't wait, because it's not addressed specifically, but is mental health issues. And I know for our law enforcement personnel, they're put in this position of being front line of mental health workers, which is really kind of unfair. And because, of course, I grew up in a community here where my mother and most of my friends had parents who were working in the mental health world at Damish Hospital and dealt with patients on a day in and day out basis. And so we were accustomed to patients in our midst and having various crises, and everybody in the community sort of knew what was expected of us to take care of them and get them back to where they needed to be. So and so my concern when we closed our mental health facilities, generally speaking, and moved to just having people out in the community is they ended up being treated very aggressively by law enforcement right out of the gate, and it's just very disconcerting and discombobulating for someone in a mental health crisis to have someone yelling at them over and over again, the whole get on the ground, get on the ground, get on the ground, and they can't even process what's being asked of them. And I know you have mental health response in your procedures, but it's not really detailed here, and I just wonder where in here also comes in the additional help, the social worker, the mental health professional. Where do we intervene, or how does law enforcement get to that level of professional when it's really beyond, when it's not a law enforcement issue so much anymore? Anyway, it's a big concern of mine, both because of my background in this community and because we have a lot of special needs housing in the city of Wilsonville. So we want this to be successful for everybody involved. Anyway, that was my concern about that, and I'll let you respond to how you deal with mental health crises.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, we started off rough, and when we look at the history of that was one of those big issues that were just thrown at the feet. There's no one else.
Yeah.
All the police. And so, admittedly, you know, all the officers across the nation, we had no clue. But I will say I'm pretty proud of where the sheriff's office is at in that regard, because we were one of the first to have a full-time mental health counselor employed at the office, and that was late 2000s. And we've started with one. We've worked our way to 4. They're co-located with us, and these are master-level clinicians. And they come to our roll calls. We all know each other by first name, so those relationships are very strong. And we all really like that program, and we could use more of it. I've always been saying that. Also, I meet frequently with the director of Rain Garden locally on a monthly basis. You know, the COVID slowed things down a bit, but it's important to me. We had some issues come up, and so we've been meeting regularly to talk about what we can do collectively to respond to these things better. And, you know, mental health clinicians will tell you that these days the police are some of the best at the de-escalation part and dealing with this, but because we've come a long way, we've been dealing with this for a long time, and we didn't get it right a lot to start. You know, there's no question because it was just thrown at us. But
right.
Over the years, we've done a lot in terms of training and melding and working with social workers, i.e. mental health clinicians, and made a lot of. We're real proud of that fact because we've been one of the first to do that.
Chief, I'd like to ask a question about relationships, I guess, between the department and the community. We hear a lot about the public lacking trust across the country, not locally particularly, but you know, across the whole range of different scenarios. We hear about transparency. Portland has had an ongoing debate about what is the proper role of citizen oversight and a mechanism to do that. Those arenas seem to me to embody a lot of the most difficult things that we're faced with in trying to maintain safe communities. I'm interested in what your perspective is. We've had at least one local citizen asking about whether we should have citizen oversight mechanism of some kind locally. So you have career experience, you know, across a range of things. You know, what does this all look like to you? What can you suggest might be an improvement over what we have so far had in the way of relationships in the community, and how might we go about adding to the trust, improving the transparency, you know, being open to citizens that want to express concerns and not being unnecessarily defensive about them wanting to understand and be able to trust our public safety people.
Yeah, I know, Mayor, you and I have had talks about this, and it's important to me, too. I mean, I am a public service, and I believe that we do police at the consent of the public. And so there's a bunch of things. Let me start with, I want to say some of the stuff we are doing, not to say we can do better, but let me start with some of the stuff we are doing. We have every year, at least twice, the Coffee with a Cop event, and then we've adjusted it to have Kona with a Cop in the evenings, so when people come after work, because people ask me about that specifically. You know, what, I can do a better job of advertising because we think that's one of the avenues where people can come, see us, talk to us, ask those kinds of questions. We've done Christmas events and had Santa Clauses and a Hispanic group. I participated in, as did some of you, with the high school diversity summit, which I thought was great, and I'd like to do more of that moving forward. I know I talked to the SRO, our school resource officer, recently, and she does a lot of work talking to the kids at the high school, and her mission really is, she's doing a great job, is to humanize the police, right? Become, at that young age, make us more approachable and more human. I speak at the Rotary Club. We've had some great times at National Night Out in our community, which is I really enjoy, and then some of the city events, and then bicycle patrols, which makes us far more approachable. I just line those out just to show what we have been doing, but again, we can do better, right? And I can do better, no problem. On a larger scale, too, the sheriff asked me to pass on there. We do Shop with a Cop. That's gone every year for many years, and we participated in that. That's a powerful event for less fortunate folks to get to spend time with police officers outside of an emergency or a criminal event or whatever other tragedy we might be there, so these kids can come and go shopping for Christmas. It's been a great event, and kids from Wilsonville participated in the past. And then we also do Camp Hope, which is a summer camp for kids also, and that we have some involvement in. So none of this is to say we can't do better. In terms of civilian oversight, right now what we do have, and again, we can expand on this, we have the Blue Ribbon Committee. I know Mr. Cosgrove's participated in some of those, and that helps. That's civilian input on what policy would look like, direction of the sheriff's office, facility management, things of that nature, and Mr. Cosgrove would probably line out a little better what some of those projects were. We do have an enhanced law enforcement district board that runs our enhanced law enforcement district, and our lieutenants do go out to CPOs, and I'll go to HOAs. And locally, I respond to any email that's sent to me, and every phone call that I get. I try to do those emails, and I try to talk to people over the phone. So we do that, and we can do better. In terms of bigger civilian oversight stuff, that's something, again, that I think is going to be part of the discussion with the sheriff and the sheriff-elect, what that looks like moving forward. I've always been a big fan of civilian or citizen involvement because it's a good thing, right? And transparency is important to us.
Yeah, it's not something that you ever arrive at, say, okay, we got that done, we can check it off. It's like an ongoing, permanent, ever-evolving component, in my view, and I hope that our deputies all support that and think that that's true too. You come back around to the whole community policing thing. I think that people want to trust their officers in their community. They want to see them as part of the community. Getting them out of the cruisers, I think, is a big part of it, and getting to know people a little bit, so that if or when a problem were to arise, people have some sort of a familiarity on which to approach and ask a question, or to gauge, or if they're feeling so, saying, well, that isn't right, we shouldn't be doing that, and have an avenue where they can be confident that someone will listen. And so that's a nebulous sort of a goal to try to have officers that are dealing with the hard and fast rules, and then also dealing with these very, very vague kind of relationship pieces, and doing it all successfully. It's a terrifically challenging job. Sure. The other point that I've heard questioned is whether the cities that contract with Clackamas County should work together in any capacity to have similar approaches or similar concerns or things like that. Have you got a perspective about that?
I do. Actually, just on a positive note, the recent community support for us has been humbling, truly touching. We've had so many people dropping off thank you letters and notes and food, and it has been touching, truly. And it just makes me want to do a better job of getting out there and making sure that we're listening and communicating. And I meet with every officer that comes out here one-on-one, and we talk about what my expectations are, and that frankly, policing in Wilsonville, it's a little bit different. One of the concerns I do have about as we have these conversations is there isn't a one-size-fits-all type of policy or procedures for every community across the United States. I mean, there's very specific things that are relatable to this community and different things perhaps in Happy Valley, right? But on that note, I do meet with the Happy Valley chief regularly. I meet with all the local West Lynn, Tualatin. You know, I talk to these chiefs regularly, and we have conversations about local issues and what are they trying, what's working, what's not working. So a lot of those conversations are going on to talk about where we can do better and what type of outreach they're doing that's had some success, and then maybe I'll try it out, things like that. So a lot of that is happening. And I know that Ms. Troha works frequently with Mr. Campbell in Happy Valley, just as an example, and they do talk about issues. And on that note, and again, an oversight, there is actually what they call the Contract City Oversight Committee. And so that committee consists of members of the Sheriff's Office, members of both cities, all three cities do include Estacada. And then there's conversations about what do we want this to look like? What do we want to move in this direction, or this type of report or that? So there is a mechanism for that, again, with members of the city involved in that.
Okay. Well, that may be Mr. Leo.
Thank you, Mayor Knapp. Councilor Linville asked about the whereas clauses. We have quickly reread the bills here and sent copies of the enrolled versions of the bill for the record. Senate Bill 1604 does not have a whereas clause. Neither does House Bill 4208. The other four bills have whereas clauses that are somewhat different in each bill. And so the question is, if you wanted to use that material when we're shaping our own public statement, that might be a good basis, but they are different in each one of the bills. And Councilor Linville, I hope that answers your question you raised.
Thank you. Yes.
All right, Chief, I know you're on vacation. I think you're on vacation. I wanted to move here pretty quickly to the rest of the staff presentation. Councilor Linville, did you have something further?
I'll just make a very quick statement, and I want our chief to know that from my perspective, I appreciate that we have officers that are out there that are putting their lives on the line every day. I can't imagine how frightened I'd be getting out of the vehicle and walking up to a car not knowing what I might find in that circumstance. And so while we have all of these concerns and issues of, that we're dealing with, and concerns of our community, and a lot of them are very, very real issues, and you recognize those this evening, and areas where we can do better. I want you to know, from my perspective, that you and our officers have my unquestioned support. And thank you for what you do for our community.
Thank you. That's very humbling. Mayor, if I could just, there's a couple things the sheriff wanted me to say specifically. Yeah. One is that he remains committed to hiring the best applicants. We talked about how, and we did the research, only the current number is only 3.5 people out of 100 make it through our process. So we are very stringent about who we hire, so we remain firmly committed to that. You know, he has been to Washington, D.C., he's been part of the 21st Century Policing Committee and bringing back best practices. He wanted me to mention that our professional standards unit comprises of one full-time captain and 2 detectives. So that's all they do is look at these violations and complaints. And we have a quality assurance unit that reviews all reports. Again, like another layer of review, more on the technical side of things. And those are some of the things he wanted me to share, just as notes of the things that we are doing right to some degree, but again, we can always do better.
Well, thank you for that. I think we're doing a lot of things right. I certainly would echo Councilor Linville also in appreciating the work that you all do in the community and really the professional way that it has been conducted. Yes, we all can improve, and given the dialogue going on in society right now, I think it behooves us all to step back and kind of reconsider where we might make some improvements that maybe have not been on the front burner for a while. But yeah, how to do that and how to be sure on the equity piece that people of different backgrounds and different ethnicities and that come from different cultures can all be comfortable that they will be treated equitably and fairly is really a huge challenge. And those of us that have not had to personally worry about some of those things, are learning. Many people in our societies have learned they have to worry about it every day when they go out their front door. So it's important for us to, look at the world through other people's eyes a little bit and see where we can understand maybe a little better than we have.
Agreed.
So thank you for the work on someone's got a dog in. Mr. Cosgrove, do we have staff presentation on another piece of this?
We have two more on this issue, Mayor, so we're going to have to be as expeditious as we can.
We should move along then.
Yeah. Go ahead, Zoe.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Zoe Monahan, Assistant to the City Manager. As a part of your...
Okay, we're having a hard time hearing you, Ms. Monahan.
Can you hear me a little better?
A little better.
You're going to have to project.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, it is better.
Okay, I will try to project my voice. I'm Zoe Monahan, Assistant to the City Manager. As a part of your packet materials, you are provided with a few options that we could consider, including a proclamation to end systemic racism and that Black Lives Matter. Another option that I'd like to focus on this evening is the My Brother's Keeper program. This is a program established by the Obama administration as a way to increase opportunities for Black men. As outlined in your packet, there are 4 steps and 6 potential areas of focus. I'm not going to go into all of them just because of the time, but a few of those core areas of focus could be successfully entering the workforce, keeping kids on track and giving them a second chance, and reading at reading level by 3rd grade. There's 4 steps in the program. The first is to publicly commit to the program and identify a point person. The public confirmation is just a pledge to build and execute a plan. The next step is to host a summit. So this would be a local action summit that's conducted within 180 days after publicly identifying that the community wants to participate in the program. The summit would include key stakeholders such as community members, nonprofits, school districts, and others that are interested to talk about assets, assess needs, determine priorities, and set goals. The third is to conduct a review and make recommendations for actions. This is a review of local policies and programs, producing a report with recommendations. And finally, putting that plan or those recommendations into action within 90 days. By being a part of the My Brother's Keeper program, they will provide resources to support our efforts at no cost. So these resources include examples of what other communities have done to put together their summit or examples of an action plan. There's also grant opportunities available. Currently, there's 140 active communities based on information I received today. There's only one in Oregon, that's the city of Portland. This is one program that could lead us towards future diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or work. Per your direction at a previous council meeting, we are looking into diversity, equity, and inclusion committee options to bring back to you at a later date. But this is just one program we wanted to bring to your attention as a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Council, questions with regard to these options that have been identified?
Mayor, I just want to be clear.
Ackervall.
I just wanted to be clear that this is just one example of something we could do. We're looking at the International City Manager Association's best practices from other communities. We'll bring back a more comprehensive list of programs and action items that you can consider. This is just one example of what some communities are doing.
Okay. Ackervall.
Thank you. Yes, I guess I'm excited to find out more information and more of the possibilities that could be open to us. One question specifically about the My Brother's Keeper program that I wondered is it seems that the 6 core areas, many of them touch on education or academic goals as well. So the partnership, I think, between, if this would be a venue that we would choose to pursue, the partnership between the city and the schools seems very important. And so I would want to hear their response and thoughts on this as well. What I did like in the material that you presented in our packets about this, the My Brother's Keepers, and perhaps there are other structures or programs that have a similar strength on this, I guess. But what I really liked about it is it seemed to really draw the entire community into this conversation and into identifying what exactly are the actions and steps, but then putting the council behind, I guess, the process and the responsibility of it and things like that. So I really liked how that could potentially work together in a very powerful way and a very inclusive way for our community members. So just some feedback and questions and thoughts on what we're seeing there is regarding a statement or a resolution or, or I guess not a resolution, would we say? I mean, we have learned.
Proclamation?
Proclamation, yeah, okay, thank you. Something like that, thank you. I wondered how following a community outreach process or following the formation of putting together a diversity group or board or committee for the city, as we've talked about in the last couple council meetings. I wonder if it could be a powerful thing in having that proclamation tied to the formation of the committee as part of our own, this is what we've identified in our community, and this is what our hope and our dreams and our desire is for Wilsonville. And this is one of the, tangible steps that we're taking to try to move us towards that goal. I wonder if that would all work nicely, and I certainly want to continue to hear from the community, and I suppose that we're getting some more information on that yet tonight as well. So I won't take any more time. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Councilor Linville.
Well, I want to just my thoughts were very, very similar to Councillor Ackervall's in listening to the presentation. I think this certainly is something that is appropriate to be reviewed by whatever is that body that we will come up with. I also agree that I think we need to have the expertise of listening to those communities to know what our proclamation needs to include. So it may be an education component, it may be a hiring and employment component. There may be multiple components in that proclamation, and I would defer. I just question whether we have the expertise to be able to generate a really meaningful and a driving proclamation, at least at this point. I would certainly hope we move quickly toward getting that group together and getting that kind of input so that the council can give that level of support.
So one of the discussions that's been going on is about whether we should hold a listening session that would enable members of the public to call in directly and not under the formality of a council meeting. It would have to be virtual at this point, but I wondered whether myself, the chief, Mr. Cosgrove, perhaps one or two others, crossed my mind, maybe the Planning Commission chair, or, could be as a panel available to people at a certain time and place to hear their concerns, to get those out in the open a little more, to be an opportunity, and whether that format would then help us understand how best to proceed to next steps, and would also provide additional opportunity for the public along the way in order to be part of the process. I don't know how anyone else feels about that. I think there are some attractive things about that approach. It is a little amorphous. You don't know what will come out of it or how we would deal with it, but it would be an open conversation kind of a thing instead of a structured kind of a presentation. I agree with Councillor Linville a bit that it seems a little arrogant for some of us to suppose that we can draft the appropriate language and wording to address people's concerns when we have not perhaps experienced those same concerns ourselves or lived our lives, with some of those concerns that other people have. And from that standpoint, I like the idea of maybe trying to do a platform where people could, have the floor to say what they would like to say, or to ask questions, or put issues out there. But I don't know how anyone else feels.
Well, that's a good segue to Mr. Evans, as we have very limited time and we still have two more agenda items.
Yes, this segues nicely.
All right.
I'm happy to be here to help you advance this important work to achieve social justice and in part broaden our perspective, because we don't have that 360 perspective that some residents of Wilsonville might be experiencing. So I'm here as a conduit, and initially, as we've sort of had these discussions internally, I've tried to focus on 3 communication goals that we might want to achieve here. And if I can figure out how to advance the slideshow, we can get to some of those. The first is an opportunity for the city and the council to sort of just tell people where we are, what our mission is. So I think I need to work with staff and with you folks to develop that statement. The second, here's an example that I'll let you just read quickly from a a page on the website in Vancouver, Washington. Reading a piece here, we recognize the existence of systemic inequalities and structural racism both in our country and in our community, and this issue demands our engagement and attention. So I would be happy to work with you to draft that language and get it out there so people know exactly where you stand. The second goal is listening and providing a mechanism for people to share their personal stories, either directly with council via email or in a public forum. And the third, I believe, is to start to identify those interested parties, to find out who's committed to the work of social justice. So as we get further down the road and start to develop committees around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have some of the right people on a list to sort of contact and target and follow up with. The most sort of obvious space to begin some of this conversation is Let's Talk Wilsonville. We can create a page there that shares our public stance and uses the site's tools, start to listen. One thing I'll probably need to hear from the council is what questions do you want to ask? And any sort of rules of engagement. We can listen, but we sort of also need to provide the community with focus, I think, to sort of find out what it is you need to know in order to take the next steps. Sort of collect anecdotal experiences from people that have had experiences with racism or other forms of oppression in Wilsonville. Let people contribute ideas, take their questions and concerns, and again, develop that list. Also, there are other channels. Mayor Knapp, you alluded to doing a virtual listening session. We have some limited experience with that. Councilor Akval was kind enough to participate in an event where we tried to sort of get members of the community into a Zoom chat room. We could do something like that, or an in-person event, a one-way video message. I'm open to other ideas as well. In the interest of time, I'll leave you there. Let me know what you want to learn. We'll draft language, we'll post it, we'll share it, we'll push it out there, and identify any additional strategies. I'm happy to support as needed.
Okay, well, this is going to have to be a collaboration between council and staff on how to proceed, and I don't know if council is ready to make any specific recommendation at this point, or if we want to figure out, more things before we do that. I've kind of gravitated toward the listening session as the next thing to help maybe me understand better where the priorities might be, and I don't know if anyone else feels that is not the appropriate next step or something would be better for a next step. I guess I would ask council what your feelings are. And Councilor Linville.
Earlier this last week, I sent an email to the mayor and to Mr. Cosgrove indicating that I believe that for us to do some kind of a listening session in some format would be, I think, in my opinion, would be very advantageous for us. There's two reasons. One is I think if it's framed correctly and moderated in a way that allows people to speak and for it to be and to be handled well, I think it could give us a really good opportunity to hear. My concern about Let's Talk Wilsonville is that I know that there are families out there that they don't have access to a computer. They may have one computer in the home and no internet. And some of those people are people who we need to be hearing from. So So if we could figure out a way that we could facilitate some of those discussions, whether they're they're waiting outside of City Hall and coming in one at a time. I don't know how we might be able to do that, but it would be my goal that we look at equitable ways for people to provide us input, especially those that may not have the technology or the technological ability to do what we do as we've now taken for granted in these days. But I think the listening session is a great idea and a way to start.
Mr. Ackervall.
I agree that a listening session seems like a good idea and would hold value for many of the reasons that Council Linville just gave. One thought in having that listening session too, I mean, I'd just like to say I really enjoyed having Chief were part of our conversation this evening. So thank you very much for joining us and one or two of our last council meetings as well. Thank you. And I would love to see you more often in our council meetings, because I think this kind of dialogue is very, it's really helpful and it's beneficial, and this is something that needs to continue on. So I would think in that listening session, definitely would want to include there, and then also perhaps the new Clackamas County sheriff as well, as she's coming into that role in January. Is that correct? Just elected last May. So that might be an opportunity to start to build some relationships there and with the community and the new sheriff as well. That was one thought that I had. As far as doing something virtually in the Let's Talk Wilsonville or a website forum, I do see some benefit in having a tool like that, because there are many people that it is difficult to carve out time at a specific point of the day to leave a comment. And the virtual, website would allow more flexibility for the time that somebody is able to enter into the discussion. And there may be some people that might not feel safe in coming in person and delivering testimony in person or on video. And I would want to be inclusive of those voices as well. So I think that it might need to be a multi-pronged approach.
Great.
I think those are all good points. Given the challenges in people's lives these days, juggling all kinds of things they didn't used to have to juggle, I guess. Seems like we should plan something, somewhat ahead so there can be plenty of time for people to hear about it and arrange to be available or to leave a written comment. And that would take somewhat more advanced work than just, announcing it and doing it, 3 days later. So I guess I'm hopeful that maybe staff can take this input and use it to start to craft something that meets these ideas of listening to perspectives, having people have an opportunity to send something in writing or an email, and also then to participate live in a session if we can schedule that a little ways ahead and have time to circulate that information effectively as a means to help us decide what is the next best step forward in our desire to try to do a better job. Does that make sense, Mr. Cosgrove, or is this too...
No, I think it would definitely take a lot of outreach, specific targeted outreach. I think it's going to take some time to advertise it and put something meaningful together. I don't think we want to rush something just to tick off a box.
Right.
So let me get together with staff and we'll bring back some ideas on how we could do something like that in the age of COVID.
All All right, that sounds good. Keeping in mind bilingual at least, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, we are taking a lot of time. I want to thank you all, especially those of you who are not charged with this normally, Mr. Leo, Mr. Werps. Appreciate it very much. As well as staff that brought the reports. Thank you for that. We have two other information items here on our work session. One is the 2020 street maintenance contract, which was detailed in the packet. Are we looking for a report or just a question?
Well, I would say unless you want a report from staff on either item, we can waive any staff report we were going to do. If you have any questions about either one, we can answer those.
All right, Council, first of all, let's talk about the street maintenance program for 2020. Any questions on that? There's quite a bit of detail in the packet if you wanted it. Low bidder, low responsible bidder, I think is Knife River on that as proposed. And then on the Public Works Complex, that is the one that's planned for Boberg Road to bring together all of our public works operations from the different facilities where they're currently scattered around the city.
And the idea
long-range plan, it was made.
The idea of advancing the design work on that is in the hopes that our Congress will actually pass an infrastructure bill, which would put us in line for some grant monies.
Well, we certainly don't want to be caught with our hands in our pockets if that happens, but I don't know.
Hey, a guy can hope.
Yes. Yeah. All right, Council, anything further we need then on that? All right, I think we're ready to end work session then. Mr. Cosgrove, if you're ready to do that, do we stay connected here for the move to council meeting?
Stay connected, but we need about 5 to 7 minutes to...
Yeah, stay connected, but we need 5 to 7 minutes to do the switch over.
All right, so by 7:10, we should all be back then and ready to go.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, and I'll call us out of work session at 7:01.
See what happens?